presidential election court endorses President Tinubu's victory. The election tribunal rejected opposition petition to overturn President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's February election victory. Nigeria's Presidential Election Tribunal ruled on Wednesday that Nigeria's main opposition parties failed to prove claims of electoral professional liability against the governing All Progressives Congress (APC) in February's disputed elections. This petition is hereby declared unmeritorious, one of the judges said, as the tribunal rejected the opposition challenge to Bola Ahmed Tinubu's win in the presidential election. The challenges came after one of the country's greatest tightly fought elections, in which former Lagos Governor Tinubu 37% of the vote, beating Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and Peter Obi of the Labour Party to secure the presidency of Africa's most populous nation. Abubakar and Obi had asked the court to invalidate the election, alleging irregularities. Judges dismissed all claims made by Labour Party candidate Obi, including fraud, charges electoral authorities broke the law, and allegations Tinubu was ineligible to run. The court was also reading its judgment on a second opposition party petition, which is also expected to be rejected. Filed by PDP candidate Abubakar, it lays out similar complaints against the February 25 election results. No legal challenge to the outcome of a presidential election has achieved success in Nigeria, which returned to democracy in 1999 after 3 decades of almost uninterrupted military rule and has a history of electoral fraud. Record low turnout. Atiku and Obi can appeal to the country's Supreme Court to strike down the tribunal's ruling. Any appeal must be concluded within 60 days of the date of the tribunal judgment. Tinubu's government had dismissed all claims of unethical conduct and appeared confident before Wednesday's decision. Currently, he is in India for the G20 summit, where he hopes to drum up foreign investment. While favorable to Tinubu, the tribunal's ruling was unlikely to generate any particular jubilation or momentum for the president after an election marked by a record low turnout of 29%. In a nation of more than 200 million people, of whom 87 million were registered to vote, Tinubu garnered just 8.79 million votes, the fewest of any president since the return to democracy. Vote was free and fair. The Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) introduced biometric technology and IRAV, a central database for uploading results in real time to ensure transparency. INEC acknowledged glitches, but dismissed claims the vote was not free and fair. But detractors said the technical problems and delays had allowed opportunities for vote manipulation. The court ruling comes as Nigerians struggle with a rising cost of living after the government ended a fuel subsidy program that kept petrol prices low and also freed up the naira currency. Government officials say the policies are needed to revive the economy, calling for patience and supplying state governments with funds to help offset the impact. Tinubu inherited anemic economic growth, high unemployment, the highest inflation rate in 2 decades, record debt, huge oil theft that has hit government revenue, and ubiquitous insecurity from predecessor Muhammadu Buhari. The government is also tackling huge security challenges, from armed groups still fighting a long war in the northeast to intercommunal clashes and kidnapped gangs operating in other regions. This news is reaching you from Ogulaga Vanguards Limited, the true face of Niger Delta. We tell your story better. For publication of press releases, statements, advert and inquiries, send an email to ogulagavanguards@gmail.com. Call 08051670922 or reach us at www.ogulavanguards.com.ng.
Recorded live for us at the Presidential Election Petition Court, where the 5 justices of the Court of Appeal unanimously, just a few minutes earlier today, indeed affirmed the declaration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu as President of Nigeria, and also dismissing the petition filed by the APM, Labour Party, and the People's Democratic Party for lacking merit and failure of petitioners to prove all allegations. I'm joined now by constitutional lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Wahab Shitu. Senior advocate, thank you for staying the course.
Thank you.
It's been a grueling 12-hour session, yes. And I know that you have monitored election petition tribunals for years now. This particular proceeding was televised live. Is it unprecedented the length of time, or is it a norm for a presidential petition like this?
Well, I think in the history of this country, what has happened today is really, really unprecedented. Not only has this judgment taken the length of time unprecedented in history, it is also the first time this kind of judgment will be televised worldwide, for the benefit of local and international audience. I think all stakeholders in the administration of justice should feel very proud of what our judiciary has shown today. All Nigerians should feel very proud. All lovers of democracy should also feel very proud. My own perspective is that we have shown clearly to the world that our democracy is working. We have also shown that central to our democracy is our respect for the rule of law. For me, there are no victors, there are no vanquished. For me, all those who have participated in the process are winners, because ultimately the president who has emerged from this process is the president of the entire country and is pretense over all institutions, all authorities, all political parties, all opponents. They will now come under his own umbrella as the father of the nation. So I think the way to go is not to malign, abuse, or scorn anybody as losers. I think the way to go is for us to see what has happened today as a collective victory. And I think what we should also see clearly displayed today is that we have seen how the judiciary works.
It also would seem that the judiciary had a point to prove, seeing how detailed the justices went in reeling out all of the judgments that we saw in the past 12 hours. But what's your thoughts of the judgment per se? Are you surprised by the outcome?
Well, I'm not altogether surprised at the outcome, because I know that judgments, I know how the judiciary functions. A lot of people who make commentaries in the public space do not know how the judiciary works, or perhaps they do not take time to find out the workings of the judiciary. And this is what has been shown today. The judiciary works on the basis of facts. Facts. The judiciary also works on the basis of evidence. The judiciary works on the basis of proof. The judiciary works on the basis of findings. The judiciary works on the basis of settled legal principles. And then the judiciary also works on the basis of conclusions arising from those settled legal principles. You can see that the judges are detached. The judges have shown courage. They have shown deep knowledge of our jurisprudence. You see, if, for instance, and at this level, this is the level where this is the Court of Appeal in presidential election is like the court of first instance, where evidence is taken, where documents are admitted, where witnesses are called and give evidence. So and this is the stage where evidence is evaluated. Because the justices take evidence from witnesses and all that. When the matter moves from this stage, evidence is not taken. If the matter moves from this stage to the Supreme Court, witnesses are not called. Documents are not tendered at the Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court will look at is the record of proceedings from the Court of Appeal. So, and they will see whether, arising from the record of proceedings from the Court of Appeal, whether documents were properly admitted, whether evidence was properly taken, and whether conclusions were properly reached, arising from legal principles. I'm so happy. I celebrate the judiciary, because before now, attempts were being made to rubbish our judiciary, to malign our judiciary, to scandalize our judiciary unfairly. And if we succeed, if we had succeeded, if the detractors had succeeded, that would have been an end to democracy. Because central to the democratic tradition is the judiciary, is respect for the judiciary. If we don't respect the judiciary, anarchy looms. So I'm very happy today that the judiciary has risen to the occasion to show that we are men and women of sterling integrity. We are unbiased umpires. We deploy the law to the facts and evidence as presented.
Well, that's how you see it as a senior advocate.
Yes.
There are varied reactions to what we've seen in the past hours. For instance, the Labour Party has already rejected the judgment, saying that it will decide its next step after consulting with lawyers. But let's talk about how unique the unanimous decision is for a case of this stature, and how much credence this has brought to today's verdict, the fact that all of the 5 justices seem to have seen it the same way.
When you have a unanimous decisions, such as you have had, it means that judges, all the justices who saw witnesses testify, who saw evidence laid, who saw documents tendered, who appreciated, who applied the law, saw all of this in the same way. They agreed unanimously with the conclusion reached. This is a unanimous decision. It is not just in terms. All of them agreed unanimously on the preliminary applications. There was no dissent. They also agreed unanimously on the merits of the case at this stage of the proceedings. So the fact that it's a unanimous decision at this stage of the proceedings makes it watertight at this stage of the proceedings. But I will tell you that this is like the semi-final stage of the proceedings. The final stage of the proceedings is the Supreme Court. You said the lawyers said they are going to decide their own line of action.
No, the party said it will meet with...
yes. I hope that whatever the parties then decide to do will be a decision on the part of constitutionalism.
Indeed.
A decision on the part of respect for the rule of law. And what is that decision? That decision that follows constitutional approaches and rule of law approach will be a decision we say, oh, we want to appeal, or we decide not to appeal, not a decision that...
Hold on for a minute, senior advocate. Let's bring in another lawyer on this conversation. Olaika Ola Daniels joins us live via Zoom. Mr. Daniels, thank you for joining us on the news this hour. The Court of Appeal made some landmark decisions on very critical issues in the preceding hours, particularly about some issues that have been raised in the past 6 months following the 2023 election. I want to hear your thought about the dismissal of the 25% votes required for a president to emerge in the FCT. The Court of Appeal is saying Abuja is like every other state with no special status. How satisfactory for you is this court's interpretation of Section 132 of the Constitution?
Well, I would say that from time before now, some of us, we have said that the people, they were clamoring for some interpretation of that particular section. They're just being mischievous, in a way, because it's clear, and we have said it, that FCT does not have a particular special status. It's just one of them, and it's so clear in the Constitution when it said "and." So you can have 25% in FCT. You do not need to have 25% in FCT to win the election. It's clear, ab initio. So people that are clamoring on it, they're just looking for a way. When you don't have a case and you just want to put all sorts that you think you can use to manipulate the people, I think that is that is actually as a result of some of the issues brought.
Right.
Looking at 25% as one of an issue to cancel the election.
I hear you, Mr. Daniels.
All know that is just.
Let me hear the senior advocate's thought on this. Will this decision by the Court of Appeal lay that issue to rest in future election disputes? Because I hear you say there is still the Supreme Court that can...
Well, as far as the law is concerned, today, the law is as pronounced by the justices of the Court of Appeal today, until the contrary. And so I'm happy that this controversy, as at this stage, is settled. I'm more particularly happy for our president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. This judgment has, like Pontius Pilate, washed him clean. The justices of the Court of Appeal have given him a clean bill of health, that he is not a criminal, that he is not a drug addict, that he has not been convicted before, that he has not been arraigned for any offense, he has not been indicted. So, lovers of democracy, lovers of this country, should now hold their heads high, that we have a president who is above board, who is credible, who is integrity driven, who is integrity personified, and who can lead the most popular black country in Africa, the largest black country in Africa. Because before this judgment, some of us are worried that our president and the chairman of ECOWAS, somebody who's leading the largest, most populous black African nation, is being tarred with this kind of stigma. Today, what the Court of Appeal has done is to wash our president very clean.
All right.
And we now know that we can all now rally around him and ensure that he succeeds in his assignment.
Mr. Ola Daniels, the court today also ruled that INEC is not mandated to electronically transmit or transfer election results, and that glitches experienced during the February presidential election wasn't employed to manipulate results. As a matter of fact, it says the petitioners couldn't prove, without reasonable doubt that it was a manipulation plot. But let's talk about the impact that the Electoral Act of 2022 has had on the Court of Appeal's verdict today, and whether or not you think it's an improvement on what we've had in the past.
Yeah, we must understand that the court is not a Father Christmas, and will not give you what does not exist or what you have not asked for. And looking at the Electoral Act is clear, and we have said this also before the court even made his own judgment on it. That look, the Electoral Act is clear. The uploading, the rev, as the Electoral Act does not give any room for it. There is no law under the Electoral Act that says that must be done. It is a guideline. There's difference between guideline rules and the law. Law is different from it. So a lot of people, like I said, when you are just being mischievous, you know the truth. And that is why it's so sad that today the Court of Appeal had to teach a lot of people a lot of lessons. The Court of Appeal had to lecture a lot of lawyers because we know the truth. The Electoral Act is clear on this, and the improvement that has done, thankfully, well, maybe in future, we may need to consider that, but then we may need to go back to the legislative arms of government to see how the law can be repealed to fit in those provisions if we want to make them part of the law that exists and that guide the entire election. But as this last election, what INEC did is not out of place. If you have plan A, you must have plan B. And if it is not the law, if it is the regulations, if it is guidelines, anything can happen. An hiccup can happen, and you cannot then use that particular itch to then say you want that the election is not worthy, the election is not free, the election is not fair, just because a particular guideline wasn't used for that particular election. The question is, has any law been breached? Has any law been violated? No. And the Court of Appeal made it clear in his judgment. He said, we are not supposed to wait till the time court will be telling us the right thing. We know it. And I just hope that lawyers, both our seniors and lawyers should know the truth and they should uphold it. And we should not just because we need to, probably for one reason or the other, for different motives, we just want to waste the time of the court. We want to waste the time of Nigerians. We just want to create chaos where there is none. For me, the Electoral Act has really made an improvement, and we all know, we can see what Beavers did. Thankfully,
this is a shining moment in the life of any man and affirmation of our democratic existence. From my heart, and truly from my heart, I say thank you very much.
665, 667, 668.
Of dollars or naira to achieve your support.
Spent over 4 years in exile campaigning for democracy.
A new president for Nigeria after an election with a turnout of only 27%. Many in the country face poverty and hunger, while armed groups present ongoing security threats. So what are Bola Tinubu's key policies and his biggest challenges? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Nigeria has a new president, Bola Tinubu. He won a closely fought election in February, but with a record low turnout. And with accusations of irregularities, the result is being challenged in court. It has the power to annul the vote and will decide on the case next month. But that wasn't on the minds of the thousands of people who turned up for the new president's inauguration on Monday. Nigeria's political and economic elite were joined by dignitaries from abroad. His message was one of unity to a country that's deeply politically divided.
Prevent the nation from terror and all form of criminality that is threatening the peace, the peace and stability of our country. We shall remodel our economy to bring our growth.
Tinubu takes over a country facing serious economic and political challenges. Despite Nigeria's abundant natural resources, many of its people suffer from hunger and poverty. Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris has more now from Abuja on what awaits the new president.
The task before Bola Ahmed Tinubu is daunting. An economic slowdown, rising poverty levels, high inflation rates, insecurity from the northeast, Boko Haram attacks in the northwest, attacks by bandits and kidnappings up to the central parts of Nigeria. And in the southeast, we're talking about a secessionist movement and oil theft in the Niger Delta. These are some of the problems Bola Ahmed Tinubu is facing on his first day in office. In his inaugural speech, he admitted one thing, that the oil subsidy regime in Nigeria that has cost the country billions of dollars every year is no longer sustainable. This could mean one thing, higher petroleum products prices at the pump. Now, apart from that, Bola Ahmed Tinubu must deal with a deeply divided nation. Because of the previous election, this country is divided along sectional, religious, and many other lines in this country. So he needs to address these issues for his government to succeed, which he promised to do that. But again, analysts are saying that the composition of his cabinet will speak to what direction his government and this country will be on in the next few months. So people are watching this closely to see which direction, who gets what, especially in the areas of defense, economic policy, and other key areas in his government. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests then for today's discussion. From Abuja, we're joined by Hamzat Lawal, founder of Connected Development, which is an organization helping Africa achieve sustainable development goals. From Washington, D.C., we're joined by Aisha Yusufu, founder of Citizens Hub, a Nigerian organization focusing on increasing women and youth participation in politics. And from Ankara, Ovigwe Egwegu, international security analyst at the Afripolitica consultancy. A warm welcome to all of you. Let's start with you, Ovigwe. 25 million votes were cast in an election of 220 million people, according to the Financial Times. A voter turnout of 27%, meaning that 2/3 of the 87 million people who registered to vote failed to do so. Would you agree that something doesn't smell right here? Was Bola Tinubu fairly elected? Is he Nigeria's legitimate president?
I mean, those numbers only paint a picture of what the Nigerian public is saying. Because you have some segment of the population saying, if you had 93 million people registered to vote, we had 27% turnout, then provided the person has the majority of the votes, that person is declared winner and returned elected. So, but you also have to look at the fact that only 9 million people voted for the president, right? And that is a very low number. If you look at even the registered voters and the general population, which is about 220 million. So yes, it was a very contested election. A lot of people are disappointed. I think overall, even though the constitutional process has been followed, there's still a case in court. And we'll have to wait until about 3 weeks from now to find out what the outcome of that will be. Already, there was one case that was dismissed by the Supreme Court that was aiming to disqualify the vice president for double nomination, but that was thrown out just some days ago. So, but I think the big one now is what the Labour Party, that is the one of Peter Obi's party, would do in regards to the outcome of the election, because there were lots of questions regarding the process and the outcome.
Aisha, outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari had staked his reputation on a clean contest. Was it a people right to be concerned? And what does the result of this election, the outcome, say to the people who your organization represents?
Well, the outcome of the election, it's not a reflection of the way the people voted. And that's the thing that's in contention right now. You did mention about the register, the party register, and the percentage of people that came out. And that's to say there's a need to actually look at that register and be sure that the people who are claimed to be registered, they're actually human beings who are registered and not just fictitious numbers. Beyond that also is to say that the election wasn't conducted the way it ought to have been conducted. INEC didn't follow its process. There were a lot of rigging. There was violence. And we must go away from the fact where we accept people rigging their way into power, because that's also a political coup. And if the world is not ready to accept a military coup, then it should not in any way accept a political coup. Situation where all manners of rigging is done and then someone is declared and people are told to go to court, that has to stop. And for a lot of Nigerians, and myself included, and Nigeria yet does not have a president. We are waiting for justice to be done. We are waiting to see, the person that the people gave their mandate to be the one that is declared, not what we have seen so far.
Hamzat, we can't really speculate upon what the courts will decide. This question, I think, is designed more to get to the legitimacy of Nigeria's judiciary here. Tinubu's already been sworn in. What happens if the courts do decide the election has to be rerun, or will they opt for acknowledging irregularities while allowing the result to stand? Is it possible that the result did, in fact, reflect the will of the people? How independent is Nigeria's judiciary?
Well, a lot of people will say the judiciary is on trial, but I think that as a society and as a people, each and every one of us is on trial. Because as a country, what is our values? And how are we going to ensure we entrench the principles of democracy, fairness, and ensure inclusivity? So if the judiciary says that the election should be upturned and a rerun held, then INEC would undertake another elections. But then there will be that debate about can we afford another elections? But I think what's important is we must continue to ensure that Nigeria does not remain stagnant. We must continue to move forward. But as we move forward, there must be justice, because if there's justice, then people can enjoy peace and prosperity in the country. But I think what's also fundamental is, yes, we might argue that Tinubu does not have popular votes, but he has majority votes, or INEC has declared that he had majority votes. And the Constitution and INEC guidelines and even INEC Act is clear on that. But I think what's also important is to have reforms. Let's reform this process. Let's reform the fabric of society, an institution that holds our fabric together and upholds democratic principle within the country.
Avigwe, if the courts do decide that the result stands and that Tinubu is the rightful president, what sort of leader is he going to be? To what extent is he going to govern in the style of his predecessor, given that they both come from the same party, who, of course, came to power promising so much, but ultimately delivering so little, at least as far as improving the lives of ordinary Nigerians is concerned?
He ran on a platform of improving the economy, creating jobs, working on security. The two major issues facing the country right now is lackluster growth, and a security crisis in many parts of the country. But it remains to be seen how he's going to execute on that. A lot of people are even concerned about his physical ability to discharge his duties. Now, put that aside and let's look at what the policy platforms. And on his inauguration day, he has announced removal of fuel subsidies, which has been a controversial issue in the country for many years. And of course, we know that with the country currently having over 20% in inflation, as of March 2022, the removal of subsidy, of course, is going to worsen those inflation. But the argument he is giving now is that removing the fuel subsidy allows him to divert such funds into infrastructure and all of that. But if you look at the scale of infrastructure deficit in Nigeria, that is a fraction when it comes to what you can save from subsidies. But overall, I think if the courts rules in its favor, he has his job cut out for him, because there's a lot of problems, that's really structural problems, both in economic dimension. If you look at that, for instance, like I said, inflation is 22%, unemployment is at 40%, and youth unemployment is even higher, at 53.4%. So even though we have all of these problems, then the particular segment of the population, which is the youth, who is not particularly popular amongst, they are the ones even facing much of the economic problems. So I think he would have to find a way to create jobs, to create a kind of enabling environment for these people to thrive, because that is the only way he can actually hold that office without seeing protest after protest, given the economic challenges that the country is currently facing.
We'll talk more about the challenges that he faces economically and politically in just a moment. But first, Aisha, how important will it be for the new president to build a cabinet comprising of people who are untainted by scandal or corruption, given the allegations that swirl around his own party? Where will he find that team? Do people of the caliber that he needs exist within his own party?
So for me to come in, first of all, just to briefly talk about a particular case that was mentioned a little bit earlier, the decision that was made by the Supreme Court on the double nomination of Senator Shettima, is to say that the court has ruled that the party that came in didn't have the local standing to do that. It's not so. The thing is still on trial. In terms of whether, for me, one of the things I think we must be consistent about is to understand that without justice, we can't have development, and we cannot keep pushing things away and just throwing things, sweeping things under the bed and all of that. We can't just move on to say that the president has been sworn in and all of that. I don't recognize that a president has been sworn in Nigeria. Not my president Buhari, not my president Tinubu, and definitely we need to get to a place where we are not giving people enabling environment to use everything to rig themselves into power and then legitimize themselves because they go on. This acceptance has been what has kept Nigerians down, and we must ensure that, first of all, let's work on getting that justice. First, he didn't get the highest number of legal votes, and that's in contention. And if we keep moving on, we continue to create enabling environments for people to do heinous things for them to get into power. We must consider political coup in the same way that we consider military coup.
Hamzat, would you agree with that?
Well, I think that, we need to be careful here because Nigeria has not enjoyed stability, both the country and even the West African region. And for me, what's important is ensure stability, right? Because we don't want a country that will go up in flame. And each and every one of us must first put our country and patriotism before anything else. I can understand that some people are still aggrieved. I can understand that some people are not happy with the outcome of the election. But I think what is important is to put our country first. I live here and my family is here. And I think that, yes, aggrieved parties are in court, and let's trust and believe in the process. But we must continue to give the Nigerian people hope. Today, what the president has to deal with is unemployment, fuel subsidy. He needs to also ensure that insecurity, and for me, when you look at insecurity, since 1999, the National Security Advisor of successive government has always been a retired military officer. I think right now we need to look at an intelligence officer, to occupy the office of the National Security Advisor, and also invest more in intelligence gathering, working with partners to mobilize resources based on data that inform policy and decision-making around insecurity. We're dealing with multidimensional poverty. Over 120 million people cannot afford $1 a day. So again, is to invest in microeconomy. How can small businesses access credit, loan, grants to finance our informal sector? I like the fact that he talked about FX and ensuring that we have a unified FX. That would also help as he removes subsidy have been removed by the end of June. But also think that we need stronger institutions. How does the National Assembly hold the executive to account? How the judiciary also translates our constitution that depicts justice, fairness, and equity. The president talks about having a cabinet that has women and men, because you can't take away gender disparity, and also the role of young people in governance and politics and informing nation building. So I think these are really important. As much as we agree, I think that we need to be careful on how we take these grievances forward, and we need to work to build more institutions so we have more stronger institutions and weaker men and women in the corridors of power.
Avigwe, would you agree with what you just heard there on what needs to be done? Why didn't his predecessor, Muhammadu Buhari, tackle all of that?
Well, in the area of security, I think we have to look at it from Buhari's administration. Buhari did make a lot of efforts in terms of strengthening the capacity of the Nigerian military, procured weapons from everywhere, from the Russians, from the Chinese, from the Americans as well, just as they are made available to him to try to build on the gains made by the previous administration of Goodluck Jonathan. However, even as he was making success in the Northeast with regards to Boko Haram, what we saw in Northwest Nigeria and the Middle Belt was an eruption of banditry, kidnapping for ransom. And if you recall, sometime in March of last year, there was the bombing of the Abuja-Kaduna Railway and over 100 people were kidnapped, several were killed during the process. So we have serious problems with regards to security that even still exist today that the new president has inherited. And then just like the previous speaker mentioned with the economy as well, there's still a lot of problems in that regard. So if he is going to tackle these issues, he would need to build a very high power cabinet that can bring together all of the necessary knowledge and expertise that can deal with these problems. However, it is still not enough to have the right people. You need financing. And Nigeria currently has a debt to GDP ratio of about 37%, and the revenues are not doing so well. So you can't even think about borrowing more money, because Nigeria as a country is really averse to borrowing more and more. And that I think one of the main questions he will need to find an answer to very quickly is development finance and financing whatever initiatives he's going to come up with, because there are a lot of initiatives and the money just isn't there.
Aisha, Tinubu said, our mission is to improve our ways of life in a manner that nurtures our humanity, encourages compassion towards one another, and duly rewards our collective efforts. Hope is back for Nigeria, he said. What about the nation's youth, though, who almost certainly didn't vote for a 71-year-old to be their president? They feel alienated by the country's political system. Do they have hope?
So I think the first thing that we need to address is this issue of stability, that constantly there's a desperation to be able to get stability over justice, over the justice of people's mandate. And that has led us to being one of the most unstabilized countries in West Africa. A lot of atrocities have been going on, a lot of killings and maiming, like had been mentioned by the previous speakers. And so we must come to a place where we are confronting the issues as they are. We all live in Nigeria. I live in Nigeria. Every of my investment is in Nigeria. My family is there. I'm here temporarily on something. I'm going to be back in Nigeria very soon. But the issue where we want to sweep away this and just continue has gotten us where we are. And like you rightly mentioned, this is someone who was not voted for by the majority of the people. And there was a sabotage that happened in terms of inflicting yourself as to be duly elected and people being dared to go to the judiciary. So this is the angst, this is the anger. The young people that have no confidence in the country, that have been killed repeatedly, that have been denied enabling environment for them to grow, decided to do what was legal, to work within the ambit of the law and go to the polls and, vote for someone they wanted. And that process needed to be allowed to happen fully and in a free, fair, and credible manner. And whatever the result it throws up, then so be it. But a situation where you're seeing direct rigging, crude rigging, killing, maiming, changing of results, and someone being declared, there is no way you're telling people to move on and have confidence in such a system. And there's no way. There needs to be the acceptance of the people. So let's not be too in a hurry to crave for this stability that we've been craving all this while, that has thrown our country into chaos. The system, when like someone said, when somebody wants to be called excellency, you must ensure that the process that brings you into office must be excellent, must be free, fair, and credible, and must be seen to be free, fair, and credible. And that's where we are. And for me personally, I'm not moving away from there. I've stayed too much on focusing on stability against people's justice, and it hasn't gotten us anywhere. It has gotten us to a worse place. As far as I'm concerned, Aisha Yusuf, I do not recognize the person of Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the president of Nigeria. He's not my president, not my president Tinubu. That's what he remains. Thank you.
So, Hamzat, what will the new president's first 100 days in office look like? Supposing that the courts decide that he is the legitimate president. As we've established, he has a wealth of problems to deal with, from insecurity to the fiscal crisis, poverty, deepening public discontent with the state. I mean, he certainly has to hit the ground running. Does he have the political skills required for such a mammoth task? How long will the electorate give him before expressing their dissatisfaction?
Well, I think he has the political skill because he's one politician that has remained relevant after the Fourth Republic. I think that his first 100 days in office has to look at corruption issues. And first to start, he must also lead by example and declare his assets publicly to the Nigerian people, and also strengthen anti-corruption agencies. Two is, how are we using savings from the fuel subsidy to invest more in education and healthcare? Because that's what he said in his speech, because he has to be clear. He said he was going to create jobs. We need to see that he creates an enabling environment for these jobs to be created. It's not the role of government to create jobs, but it's the role of government to create enabling environments and attract a direct foreign investment that helps to ensure a distribution of wealth and creation of jobs and values. Also, is to how is he engaging women? Because when you look at society today, we don't have a lot of women in the corridors of power. After the elections, the National Assembly, the numbers of women that got re-elected into the National Assembly continues to decline. How is he able to balance this with his appointment on the cabinet? And also young people, what are the roles of young people in his government? And what's his definition of youth? Because we've seen 60-year-olds to call themselves youth in the corridors of power. I think this could inform what becomes of his 100 days in office as the court decides the outcome of the election. But beyond that, also, he needs to commit to an electoral reform. We know that today, INEC did not deliver on her own promises in adhering to the process and even the 2022 Electoral Act, with the fact that IREF failed Nigeria to provide real-time information on the results. So is he committing to an electoral reform that truly allows INEC to be independent without external interference, and also ensure that there are consequences to action or inaction, leading by example, because today Nigeria, sadly, is with a country without consequence, where everything goes. And with that, the rule of law would not, take the front seat.
Vic, we've spent much of our discussion focusing on Nigeria's domestic problems. Let's look in the last few minutes of the programme externally. Where does Nigeria stand regionally? A country of its size and wealth arguably should be wielding far more clout than it does with its regional neighbours. What will foreign policy look like under the new president?
Yeah, there are very clear foreign policy objectives that he has to pursue, and one of them is actually security. But we have over 2.5 million people displaced in the Lake Chad because of the Lake Chad basin countries, because of the war against Boko Haram and ISWAP. So, of course, there is a multinational joint task force, including Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, working together collaboratively to ensure that they really win the war on terror. And he has to continue and at least double down on that. That is a very clear one. Also, in the West African region, we've seen coups in recent times in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and very recently, Nigeria was, under Buhari's administration, Nigeria was involved in the Gambia, providing stability after Yahya Jammeh refused, to accept the outcome of the election. So Nigeria has a role to play in the West African region, not just security in Lake Chad and Sahel, but also in terms of other economic issues as well. In the broader African region, with AFCFTA being instrumentalized and operationalized, of course, we know that certain investments in Nigeria are looking forward to take advantage of the AFCFTA. So Nigeria needs to be seen as not just providing a kind of political leadership in the West African region, engaging with these juntas to transition so that they transition to democracy. It also needs to play its role in security in the Lake Chad, in the Gulf of Guinea, where we have piracy issues. It has to continue to do that. And in Africa as a whole, the AFCFTA, bringing that into full implementation.
Hamzat, I've got about a minute left on the programme. Do you want to just tell me what you think the foreign policy priorities should be under the new president?
Well, in his speech, he mentioned working closely with ECOWAS and the African Union and other partners. But I think that Nigeria needs to take her position in the affairs of nation. We used to be called the giant of Africa. Our foreign policy must strengthen the role of ECOWAS in the sub-region and ensure that the instability experienced in Mali and other countries where military junta has subverted the will of people and democracy needs to be addressed, and how African Union respond when the issue of Africa has been discussed, and how the world also respect Africa and allow them to strive in the global markets. And Nigeria playing her role with the numbers that we have as a people.